when gods bent genders and nobody blinked. So the god Loki got pregnant. Yes, that Loki. Turned into a mare, got mounted by a stallion, and gave birth to an 8-legged horse. And the Norse were totally fine with it. No protests, no pearl clutching. Just, oh wow, that's Sleipnir, what a majestic baby. Because in Norse mythology, gods could do pretty much anything. Switch genders, wear dresses, flirt with horses, you name it. And their followers would just nod and say, how wise. But if a man, a regular mortal, flesh and bone guy tried something even remotely similar, he wasn't seen as mystical. He was seen as disgusting, dangerous, unfit to live in society. Why the double standard? Why could Odin rock a woman's robe and practice feminine magic like it was no big deal, but a man doing the same thing down the street risked exile? Or worse. That's the twisted beauty of Viking society. They didn't ban what they hated. They just made sure only the right people could do it. Theory for you. The Norse weren't confused. They were calculated. By letting only the gods bend the rules, they turned fluidity into divine privilege and made sure everyone else stayed painfully rigid. So how exactly did this system work? How do you outlaw something without actually outlawing it? Well, let's talk about what happens when you erase the words instead of writing the rules. The language of power. Ever tried describing something that technically doesn't exist? Yeah, Viking society did that with homosexuality. They had no word for male same-sex relationships. None. Not because it didn't happen. Not because they didn't know what it was, but because not naming it gave them more power over it. Smart, right? Creepy smart. Let's break this down. In a world where gods could casually flip genders and wear magical skirts, you'd think human men had a bit of leeway. Nope, the system didn't bother outlawing same-sex contact directly. Instead, it targeted the man who received. The act, not illegal. The role, that was the real crime. If you were on top, dominant, assertive, congratulations, you were still a man. But if you dared to take the passive position, well, pack your bags, you just got socially executed. And the Viking legal system had a vocabulary of violence for that. Argr, unmanly, perverted. Argi, dishonorable, shameful. Sorðinn, sexually used, socially ruined. These words weren't just insults, they were verdicts. And here's the real trick. The Norse didn't need police or inquisitors. They had honor, a fragile, glorified balloon every man had to keep inflated 24/7. Your masculinity wasn't protected by law. It was held hostage by reputation. One wrong word, one whispered rumor, and the whole house of cards came tumbling down. And once someone accused you of being sorðinn, you only had two choices. Kill them, be killed. Both literally. There was no innocent until proven guilty. There was just blood, either theirs or yours. This wasn't about sex. It was about power. Sex was just the tool, the scalpel that carved the hierarchy. Because in this world, receptivity equaled weakness. Submission wasn't just bad, it was contagious. But this system wasn't just legal. It crept into the way men sat, drank, and laughed. Every gesture became a performance. Every silence a shield. So let's step inside the longhouse and see how masculinity was policed over ale and awkward spacing. The choreography of survival. You ever been so terrified of being too close to another dude, you sat like a damn statue? Well, welcome to Viking masculinity, where a hug could ruin your entire life. Let's talk longhouses. Big smoky halls filled with bearded warriors swapping stories, showing off battle scars, and carefully avoiding prolonged eye contact. Sounds fun, right? These men drank from the same horn, shared war spoils, slept inches apart during winter raids, but God forbid your hand brushed someone's knee. That was social suicide. Everything was calculated. How far apart you sat, how long you laughed, whether your laughter sounded too soft. Men in Viking society lived in constant low-level fear, not of swords or monsters, but of being mistaken for someone receptive. Imagine performing hypermasculinity not just on the battlefield, but over dinner. Hold the drinking horn firmly. Don't cross your legs. Don't lean in too much during a joke. And whatever you do, never show affection. Unless it's through a brutal roast session. That's allowed. This wasn't brotherhood. It was a masculinity minefield. And it didn't stop there. A man falsely accused of being sorðinn could suddenly find, his words weighing less in council meetings, his opinions ignored like background noise, people literally pretending not to see him. You could still breathe, eat, labor, but socially, you were dead. You weren't even exiled. You were just ghosted. Your wife might stop speaking to you. Not because she believed the accusation, but because if she didn't, her own status would rot by association. Your kids, other parents pulled them away like you were contagious. The system didn't need jails. It used silence. It weaponized absence. It turned everyday community life into a soft purge. And here's the kicker. This wasn't accidental. It was by design. The same society that told stories of gods switching genders and birthing magical animals also made it impossible for human men to even shift their posture the wrong way. But what happens when someone does cross the line, willingly or not? When someone gets caught in the gears of this honor machine and dragged through its teeth? Let's meet the man carved into stone, still breathing but erased. The stone that outlived the man. In Viking society, you didn't need to die to be buried. Sometimes they carved your name into stone while you were still breathing, just to let everyone know your soul had left the building. Picture this. A granite slab rises in the village center, cold and silent. Fresh chisel marks spell one word, argr, that's it. No dates, no explanation, just that brand. And everyone knew what it meant. The man, he was still alive. He still chopped wood, carried water, maybe even traded fish at the market. But socially, he was already gone. That stone wasn't a tombstone. It was a permanent receipt of shame. How do you kill a man without spilling blood? Easy. Carve his name into silence. Stop looking him in the eye. Let the kids learn to avoid him the way they avoid stray dogs and frozen lakes. This was honor law, Viking edition. There were no appeals. No, let's hear both sides. A single word could detonate your entire identity. The law didn't even need witnesses. No physical evidence. Just the accusation. Someone could call you sorðinn, sexually used, and boom, you had to challenge them to a duel or wither in disgrace. And here's the irony. Your right to challenge relied on your masculine honor, which was already in shambles because of the accusation. It's like trying to win a boxing match after someone's already cut off your arms. So what did these men do? They sat in the dirt, literally. Cross-legged outside the hall, posture rigid, hands on knees, not too submissive, not too aggressive, just frozen. Calculated survival. For days they'd sit, waiting for the law to acknowledge them, while the community walked around them like fog. Even their wives stayed silent, not from cruelty, but from self-preservation, because touching that disgrace was like touching fire. It spread. And the stone, still there, covered in frost every morning. Its letters fading slowly, but never enough to forget. It stood taller than the man it branded. It stood longer than any sympathy. It outlasted his voice, his reputation, and maybe, eventually, even his will to live. But hey, that's what happened when a man got accused. What about when the Vikings did it on purpose? When they turned shame into a weapon of war? Ritual of ruin. You thought exile was bad. Now imagine being stripped, tied up, and used not for lust, but for lesson planning. A coastal village gets raided, screaming, blood, standard Viking Tuesday. But they're not just here for gold and goats. They're here for a message. They find the chieftain, the village's protector, leader, symbol of pride. And what do? They don't kill him, they humiliate him, ritualistically, publicly. On purpose, his decorated cloak torn off, his body bound naked, exposed to salt spray and stares. The goal isn't pleasure, it's collapse. Collapse of his status, his leadership, his very identity. They didn't just abuse him. They positioned him like setting a stage. Because in Viking logic, posture equals power. Make a man kneel in front of his people. That's not a kink, that's a social nuke. This is psychological architecture in action. Each act is planned. Not random cruelty, strategic degradation. The raiders become performers, the villagers, a captive audience. This is educational theatre, Norse edition. They watch their leader become a shell, eyes hollow, shoulders slumped, voice gone. And they understand, this is what happens if you fight back. No need to conquer 10 more villages. Just let the broken man walk back home and they'll conquer themselves. It's not just the physical act, it's the storytelling. Every retelling spreads the shame, and every listener knows, if it could happen to him, it could happen to anyone. Could this be why Viking raids were so successful, so feared and so efficient? Because humiliation spread faster than fire and left deeper scars than swords. Maybe that's why they didn't always kill their enemies. They needed them alive to become walking propaganda. And now, the real kicker. This brutality wasn't even the worst part. That came later when religion joined the party and turned shame into salvation. The holy upgrade. Think the Vikings were harsh. The church took their manual, rewrote it in Latin, and slapped divine judgment on it. Welcome to pain with paperwork. So the Norse gods fell. Odin packed up his shape-shifting and dipped. Enter Christianity with incense, confession booths, and a terrifying new idea. Sin. Suddenly, humiliation wasn't just social. Now it was eternal. Being called sorðinn by a Viking meant shame. Being called a sodomite by a priest. That meant hell. Before, if someone insulted your masculinity, you could challenge them to a duel. Now, you confess, and get whipped while monks take notes. Correction, they called it, not torture. Just a loving tap from the Lord with a leather strap. The Vikings punished passivity. The church, they punished everything. Passive, active, thinking about it, sneezing near another man, boom, sin. No more duel, no more blood feud. Now it's repent or burn. Under the church, shame became universal. Nobody was safe, because desire wasn't just dishonorable, it was demonic. The system democratized guilt. Everyone was sinful by default. Just for existing wrong. They whipped you, made you bleed, and told you, this is love. The scar, a reminder that your soul was learning. Even the language evolved. Argr became abomination. Argr became unnatural. Same fear, new vocabulary. Same control, new font. Did Christianity save Viking society? Or did it just optimize its most violent features under the branding of divine order? Maybe the true innovation wasn't spiritual redemption, but industrial scale shame. And while the gods disappeared and the crosses multiplied, one thing stayed exactly the same, the target. The man who broke the mold still got broken in return, coming up in shadows that refused to die. Let's talk legacy, because this system, it didn't end in monasteries. It moved into homes, offices, and TikTok comment sections. Echoes that never died. You think this ended in the monasteries? Oh no, my friend. It just moved into your workplace, your family dinner, and your For You page. Centuries passed. The gods were forgotten. The crosses got stylized into jewelry. But the architecture of control, it kept going silently, efficiently. This wasn't history anymore. This was infrastructure. The modern masquerade, today's world says, we're progressive now. But let a man cry, hesitate, or God forbid, show softness. Suddenly the room gets quiet. The laughter shifts. The ancient alarms go off. No rune stones, no whips, just mockery, isolation, and cold silence. The words change, but the wounds stay identical. From argr to sodomite, from sodomite to disorder. Now he's too sensitive. Not man enough. A bit off, but the meaning is the same. He broke the script. Viking accusations, medieval confessions, modern slurs, academic diagnoses, Twitter jokes, all part of the same bloodline, all built to contain the male body, to punish any softness, any yielding, any refusal, to play the role of the unfeeling, conquering machine. Maybe it's not that societies fear homosexuality. Maybe what they really fear is the collapse of gender obedience, of dominance theater, of the illusion that a real man must always be the sword, never the open hand. So the system doesn't need gods anymore. It doesn't even need churches. All it needs is habit, a joke in the locker room, a glance at the dinner table, the feeling that you must always perform, or risk being the next silent casualty. We've reached the final step in this journey, not forward, but deeper into the machine, coming up in breaking the mirror or learning to smile at the ghost. Because maybe the question isn't, why did they do this to us? But why are we still doing it to each other? Breaking the mirror or learning to smile at the ghost. They say time heals all wounds, but what if the wound was never meant to heal? What if it was designed not to kill you, but to shape you? To mold your every move, every gesture, every word. Not with chains, but with silence. Not with law, but with laughter. And now, centuries later, here we are, still walking through the ruins. Only we don't see ruins. We call them traditions, morals, standards, just how things are. But make no mistake, the machine is still running. It's quieter now, more polite. It wears a rainbow pin on its lapel and says, "Hey, you be whoever you want to be." Right before it changes the subject when your voice breaks, or scoots away from softness like it's contagious. You know the machine is still working when your nephew gets mocked for dancing, when your uncle refuses to hug his own son, when a teen scrolls through TikTok, seeing 1,000 filters but not one space where he feels seen. We broke the rune stones, we buried the whips, we kissed the crosses and called it progress, but we never broke the mirror, the one that still whispers, "You must be hard. You must not yield. You must never, ever be perceived as someone who could receive." And when a man finally does crack, when he sobs or collapses or simply says, "I'm tired of pretending," the world acts surprised. But don't be surprised, because the architecture was never built to let him through. It was built to watch him fall. The gods who once danced between genders still linger, not in temples, but in every moment you question your softness. They weren't just myths, they were masks showing you what you could never be. And now, maybe it's time to take them off. Not to burn them, not to rage against them, but to say, thanks for the warning. Because the ghosts are still here. The chieftain's silence, the monk's lashes, the locker room joke, all echoing the same message. Don't break the rules. But maybe, just maybe, breaking them is how we finally stop haunting ourselves. So here's your question. Not why did they do this to us, but why are we still doing it to each other? Because systems don't survive unless we feed them. And maybe it's time to stop serving silence. If this story hit a little deeper than you expected, good. That's what history is supposed to do. Not just inform, but reveal. So drop your thoughts below. I want to hear what you see in this mirror. Smash that like button if this made you think. Subscribe if you want more stories that peel back the surface. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is whisper where they once screamed, or laugh where they once wept, or simply be exactly what they feared. Till next time, stay soft, stay sharp, and stay dangerous.